Cadillac Williams. Let's start with Auburn's Carnell Williams, better known as Cadillac. Now, you might think it's because he was smooth like a luxury ride, but the real story comes from the broadcast booth. A TV broadcaster watching Williams play said his running style was a notch above everyone else on the field, like he was cruising in a Cadillac while everyone else was stuck in traffic. The name stuck because, honestly, watching Cadillac glide through defenses really did look that smooth. What made it even better was how Williams embraced it. He'd celebrate touchdowns by pretending to shift gears, and Auburn fans ate it up. The guy averaged over 1,100 yards rushing in back-to-back seasons, proving that sometimes you really can cruise your way to greatness. The Honey Badger. Down in Baton Rouge, Tyrann Mathieu earned one of the most feared nicknames in college football, the Honey Badger. His LSU defensive coordinator saw a viral YouTube video about honey badgers being absolutely fearless, and it reminded him of his 5'9" safety who'd launch himself at anyone, anywhere on the field. Mathieu's bleached blonde hair even matched the Badgers' coloring, making the comparison perfect. But here's what really sealed it. Honey badgers are known for taking on animals way bigger than them. And that's exactly what Mathieu did every Saturday. He'd line up against 6'4" receivers and 250-pound tight ends without blinking. The honey badger became legendary because just like the animal, honey badger don't care. He was coming for you. The Freak. Florida's Javon Kearse got tagged as the Freak, and if you ever watched him play, you'd understand why immediately. At 6 feet 4 inches and 262 pounds, Kearse moved like he was defying physics, running down quarterbacks from impossible angles and making plays that shouldn't have been humanly possible. His college teammates started calling him the Freak because his athletic ability genuinely freaked them out. But it wasn't just his speed that earned the name. Kearse had this uncanny ability to bend around blockers in ways that didn't look natural. Offensive coordinators would watch film of him and just shake their heads. When you're making other elite athletes question what they just witnessed, that nickname writes itself. If you're loving these SEC nickname stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We've got way more college football content coming your way. Hefty Lefty. Kentucky's Jared Lorenzen became known as the Hefty Lefty. And this one's pretty obvious when you look at him. At 6 feet 4 inches and anywhere from 285 to 320 pounds depending on the season, Lorenzen was definitely hefty for a quarterback. But here's what made it special. He was also left-handed, which was rare enough in college football. The combination of his size and his southpaw delivery made Hefty Lefty stick like glue. Lorenzen embraced it completely, even joking about his weight throughout his career. What made him legendary wasn't just the nickname, though. It was watching this massive dude scramble around the pocket and somehow make throws that skinnier quarterbacks couldn't. He'd roll out, defenders would think they had him cornered, and then he'd sling a perfect spiral 40 yards downfield. The man redefined what a quarterback could look like. Deuce McAllister. Ole Miss had Deuce McAllister, who everyone called Deuce. The real story goes back to junior high school, where his coach couldn't deal with pronouncing Deuce and just started calling him Deuce instead. The coach even gave him jersey number 2 to match the nickname, making it official from day one. The name followed him from Mississippi all the way to the NFL, where Saints fans loved chanting his name. McAllister had this smooth running style that made the nickname feel right. He wasn't the biggest back, but he had this way of finding the perfect gap and slicing through it. Deuce became synonymous with clutch performances, especially in big games where Ole Miss needed someone to step up. Champ Bailey. Georgia's Roland Bailey earned the nickname Champ from his grandmother, who started calling him that when he was just a little kid. She'd watch him play and tell everyone that her grandson was going to be a champion someday. The nickname followed him through his youth football days and stuck when he got to Georgia. When Bailey actually started dominating on the football field, his grandmother's prediction suddenly looked pretty smart. Bailey had this swagger about him that backed up the name. He'd talk trash to receivers before the snap, then lock them down completely. The guy intercepted passes like he was collecting trading cards, and every time he made a big play, you'd hear, "That's why they call him Champ," echoing through Sanford Stadium. Johnny Football, Money Manziel. The Aggies' Johnny Manziel became Johnny Football, and this nickname basically wrote itself. Manziel got the moniker during his freshman year when he was doing things that seemed impossible for a college quarterback. The name started with his teammates who said he didn't just play football, he was football. Every play looked like a highlight reel, whether he was scrambling out of sacks, throwing no-look passes, or just making magic happen out of thin air. What made Johnny Football stick wasn't just his ability, though. It was his personality. The guy lived and breathed the game 24/7, always talking about football, always thinking about the next play. But Manziel had another nickname that was just as famous, Money Manziel. This one came from his signature celebration where he'd rub his fingers together like he was counting cash after big plays. The money sign became his trademark, and fans ate it up. Some say the nickname also referenced how clutch he was in big moments. When Texas A&M needed a play, Manziel would deliver like money in the bank. The irony is that Money Manziel would later become controversial when questions arose about whether he was actually making money off his autograph while still in college. But during his playing days, both nicknames captured different sides of the same phenomenon. A quarterback who was pure football magic and had the swagger to back it up. When you're reinventing the quarterback position and making Heisman Trophy voters forget about every other candidate, having two legendary nicknames just proves how special you really were. Mount Cody. Alabama's Terrence Cody earned the nickname Mount Cody, and one look at the guy tells you everything you need to know. At 6 feet 4 inches and somewhere between 350 to 370 pounds depending on the day, Cody was literally mountain-sized. But here's what made the nickname perfect. He didn't just look like a mountain, he played like one too. Offensive lines would run into him and just stop, like they'd hit a brick wall. The nickname started with his Alabama teammates who said blocking Cody in practice was like trying to move an actual mountain. What made it legendary was how Cody embraced it. He'd celebrate big plays by flexing and pointing to the sky, like he was claiming his peak. The man was so big that opposing teams had to completely change their running schemes just to avoid going directly at Mount Cody. Swag. Ole Miss had Chad Kelly, who went by Swag, and this nickname was all about attitude. Kelly got the name in high school because of his supreme confidence and flashy playing style. The guy would make throws that other quarterbacks wouldn't even attempt, then strut around like he just painted the Mona Lisa. His teammates started calling him Swag because everything he did on the field just oozed confidence. The way he'd flip the ball to refs after completions, how he'd point to receivers before they even made their breaks, the casual way he'd scramble out of pressure like it was no big deal. Kelly had this swagger that was impossible to ignore, and honestly, when you're slinging the ball around the SEC like he did, maybe a little swag is justified. Slim Reaper. Alabama's Devonta Smith became known as the Slim Reaper, and this nickname is absolutely perfect when you think about it. At 6 feet 1 inch and barely 175 pounds, Smith looked like he might blow away in a strong wind. But here's the thing, he was absolutely deadly on the football field. The slim part was obvious, but the Reaper came from how he just killed defensive backs with his route running. Smith had this way of making defenders look foolish that was almost supernatural. He'd run these precise routes and then just disappear from coverage like he was never there. His Alabama teammates started calling him the Slim Reaper because watching him work was like watching death itself. Quiet, efficient, and absolutely inevitable. When you're winning Heisman trophies as a wide receiver, the Reaper part of that nickname makes total sense. Tank Bigsby. Auburn's Cartavius Bigsby got nicknamed Tank. And honestly, this one's pretty self-explanatory when you watch him run. Bigsby got the name because of how he just bulldozed through defenders like he was an actual armored vehicle. The nickname started in high school when his coaches noticed that Bigsby didn't really try to avoid contact. He'd actively seek it out, running over linebackers and safeties like they were speed bumps. What made Tank perfect was Bigsby's running style. He'd hit the hole with this low center of gravity and just keep churning his legs until he'd plowed through whoever was in his way. The guy would take hits that should have stopped him cold, then drag 3 defenders for extra yards. That's tank-level toughness right there. Aha! Alabama's Hashawn Clinton Dix became known simply as Ha Ha, but the origin is way sweeter than you might think. His grandmother gave him the nickname because people couldn't pronounce Hashan correctly, and she found it funny how everyone would struggle with it. So she just started calling him Ha Ha, and it stuck with the whole family. What made the nickname perfect was how it fit his personality too. Clinton Dix was always smiling, always joking around with teammates, and had this infectious laugh that you could hear across the practice field. The guy had this ability to switch from class clown to stone cold safety in seconds, making big plays while keeping that same joyful energy his grandmother loved. Kool-Aid McKinstry. Alabama's Gag Quincy McKinstry earned the nickname Kool-Aid from his grandmother, who thought his big, bright smile looked just like the Kool-Aid Man from those classic commercials. She'd tell him he was always smiling like that happy pitcher, and the name just stuck. What makes this story even better is that McKinstry eventually landed an actual endorsement deal with Kool-Aid, turning his grandmother's observation into cold hard cash. The nickname fit because McKinstry played cornerback with that same kind of confidence. He'd break up passes and make interceptions like he was just casually strolling through the secondary. Plus, the guy had this way of making big plays look effortless, like he was just sipping Kool-Aid while everyone else was sweating bullets. The Terminator. Kentucky had another memorable nickname with John Connor, who became known as the Terminator. This one's pretty straightforward. His last name was Connor, just like the character John Connor from the Terminator movies. But what made it stick was how Connor played fullback. He'd terminate defensive players with crushing blocks and punishing runs. The nickname was too perfect not to use, especially when Connor started bulldozing through SEC defenses. What made it even better was Connor's personality. He was this quiet, methodical player who'd just show up and destroy people. No trash talk, no celebrations, just pure termination. Linebackers would see him coming and know they were about to get trucked. Superman Tebow time. Florida's Tim Tebow picked up several nicknames, but Superman became the most famous. It started because of his incredible ability to seemingly do everything, even coming off the bench as a freshman to run goal line situations. Tebow would simulate ripping open his jersey after big plays, mimicking Superman's iconic move. His teammates and fans ran with it because watching Tebow play really did feel like watching someone with superpowers. The guy would take hits that should have knocked him out, then bounce up and throw a touchdown pass on the next play. What sealed the Superman nickname was his leadership. He'd give these speeches that would make grown men cry, then go out and back it up with superhuman performances when the game was on the line. But Tebow had another nickname that became just as legendary, Tebow time. This one captured something different about his game, his incredible ability to perform in clutch moments when everything was on the line. The phrase started during his college days when Florida would be in tight games and fans would start chanting, "It's Tebow time," because they knew something magical was about to happen. The nickname really exploded during his NFL days with Denver, where he'd engineer these impossible fourth-quarter comebacks that defied all logic. Tebow time became this phenomenon where time seemed to slow down, and Tebow would just take over games through pure will and determination. Whether it was his college days leading Florida to championships or those wild NFL playoff runs, both nicknames captured the same truth. When the lights were brightest and the pressure was highest, Tebow somehow found a way to be superhuman. King Henry. Alabama's Derrick Henry became known as King Henry, though the exact origin gets debated. Some say it came from a magazine interview where Henry mentioned loving the Lion King movie, which Henry himself denies. What's more likely is that his running style, powerful, authoritative, and absolutely dominant, reminded people of a king ruling over his kingdom. When you're stiff-arming NFL defenders into the dirt like Henry did to Josh Norman, the crown fits pretty well. Henry had this regal way of running where he'd let defenders come to him, then just impose his will. The guy would break tackles that should have brought down a rhinoceros, then accelerate past defensive backs like they were standing still. That's king-level dominance right there. Big Cat. Auburn's Jeremy Johnson got nicknamed Big Cat, and this one came from his high school days in Montgomery. Johnson was always a big kid with quick reflexes, and his coaches started calling him Big Cat because he moved like a large cat, smooth, powerful, and surprisingly agile for his size. The nickname followed him to Auburn, where fans hoped he'd pounce on SEC defenses the same way. Johnson had all the physical tools that made the Big Cat nickname make sense. He could make throws from awkward angles and had this way of escaping pressure that reminded you of a cat landing on its feet. The Eraser. Florida's Reggie Nelson became known as the Eraser because of his ability to completely wipe out offensive plays. Nelson had this incredible knack for showing up at exactly the right moment to erase what looked like sure touchdowns. He'd come flying across the field to break up passes or make tackles that erased big gains before they could happen. His teammates started calling him the Eraser after he kept making plays that literally erased points off the scoreboard. The nickname fit perfectly because Nelson played with this surgical precision. He wouldn't just make tackles. He'd completely eliminate the play like it never happened. Squirrel. Tennessee's Marquarius White earned the nickname Squirrel from his grandmother after a specific incident where she watched him moving around the yard in perfect sync with an actual squirrel. She thought it was hilarious how he seemed to mirror the little animal's twitchy, quick movements. But the nickname stuck because it perfectly described his playing style too. White had this jittery energy about him, couldn't stand still during practice, and when he got the ball, he'd dart around defenders with these sudden direction changes that looked exactly like a squirrel avoiding traffic. The guy would make catches in traffic and then immediately start looking for the next move, never staying in one spot for long. Pork chop. Mississippi State's Floyd Womack got called pork chop by his mother, who said he was big and stocky and reminded her of wrestler Pork Chop Cash. His mom thought the comparison was perfect. Both were these powerful, no-nonsense guys who got the job done through pure strength. Womack embraced it completely, and Mississippi State fans loved chanting pork chop whenever he made a big play on the offensive line. Womack had this old-school meat and potatoes style of blocking that made the wrestling comparison feel right. He wasn't flashy, but he'd grind out blocks all game long, wearing down defenders like he was in a wrestling match. The guy was built like he could go 12 rounds and still be standing at the end. These SEC nicknames prove that sometimes the best stories come from the simplest moments. A grandmother's mispronunciation, a childhood habit, or just the way someone moves on the field. Subscribe for more SEC stories and hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest college football content.